Hi, welcome fans to another Dark Side of MonoGame session. And this time we're going to go over using MonoGame with Visual Studio 2017. It was just released yesterday, so this should be rather exciting. So let's kick it off and say, solidarity, brothers and sisters. Yay. If you want to look at the 2015 version of this, if you're still using 2015, then I suggest you look at this video, which you should be able to find by clicking on this link here. This is a set of videos just to pair up using either side, because there are subtle differences in the setup between 2015 and 2017, so I did two videos because it was just simpler. But as we start, okay, so news headlines, and basically as of March 2017, MonoGame 3.6 has been released through a righteous applause, and much drinking and games were had. I suspect there'll still be a point release coming up to make sure there's nothing left over, but 3.6 is stable, and I think there's a few things that came after which obviously will just need patching up, one of which I'll mention in a bit. But all in all, 3.6 is great. There's a huge amount of performance improvements and tweaks and extra APIs in there, so it's worth reading through the release notes to find if your favourite feature has now been enhanced. Also, as of yesterday at the time of recording, Visual Studio 2017 was also released, and I can't even say that with a straight face. And to any of you who watched the launch event, it was riveting and a very excited audience. I was thoroughly entertained for the hours that the session went on. Lots of news in there, a lot of things which help MonoGame and make things a whole better place. But yeah, it's an interesting times. It's suddenly a lot faster to start, I've found. But it has its own little behaviours. But anyway, especially with things moving around the screen. Oh, anyway, I digress. So, we're here today because we're going to get started with Visual Studio 2017. And we're going to go through what you need to install for different types of projects, what you need to get things started, and getting on it, basically. Like I said, 2017 is different, and also to be aware that 2017 behaves differently whether you have Visual Studio 2015 installed already or whether it's standalone. Might sound odd, but you get different behaviors and different things happening, which is unfortunately which caused one very late bug in MonoGame, but that's fixed. It's there in the development branch, and we'll talk about it later anyway. So, if you've not seen it already, this is the new Visual Studio 2017 installer. From the very beginning, this has been streamlined down to make sure that it's the fastest install for Visual Studio ever. Supposedly being able to install in less than a minute. Well, when they say less than a minute, they mean the actual core Visual Studio experience. So you can open projects, you can create blank solutions. That's about it you can do when you do in a minute. Installing everything else is going to take a bit of time, because unless you've got hundreds of gigs of download space, it still will take a little time to get installed. But it is arguably faster. So, out of the box, if you install Visual Studio 2017 without selecting any additional options, just the core editor, you can't really do much. You certainly can't use MonoGame or build MonoGame solutions, but you can edit projects and you can create a blank Visual Studio solution. Fantastic. You know, out of the box, it just gets you there. If you don't select anything, you won't really be able to do much, to be honest. So, to really get started, prerequisite for getting MonoGame running in Visual Studio 2017 is the .NET development module, which you can see highlighted in the top right here. Once you've installed this, and also make sure you check out the options on the right-hand side. Most of these are checked by default, except for some reason I've got... Oh yeah, I have F# installed because I also installed .NET Core, just because I like to play, but it's unchecked here as well. I've not looked into that properly yet. I've only upgraded to the full release candidate yesterday. Give me some time. Anyway, but by installing the .NET development actual module, is that you're going to get, as you do with 2015, is that you're going to be able to do Windows Desktop DX. You can do the cross-platform OpenGL projects, which obviously replace the old Linux and Windows GL projects themselves. Notably, I noticed on NuGet today, in fact, is that there's a move to sort of get rid of the Linux and Windows GL NuGet packages just to clean things up, because the OpenGL cross-platform project replaces all of those. It's just one single project now instead of many. It's a boon, in my opinion. And you'll also be able to build content pipeline extensions. So from there, you can start building, get up and running, And as I said previously, is that if you are serious about building a proper multi-platform project, check out the video I did on building a cross-platform MonoGame project. It'll help you get set up, get your content projects right, setting up your file structures and things like that, just to get things going. If you're just doing prototyping, want to play with stuff, don't bother, just build it. So you've got your Windows project and you want to go and do some Android. Okay, so again in 2017 things are slightly different now because it's all slightly moved around. For this you're going to need the minimum of the mobile development with .NET module, and on the right hand side you must check, I stress you must check, that you're running the NDK version that they supply and also the SDK version they supply. You may want to add additional NDK or SDKs later. There are tools in Visual Studio. If you simply go into the tools Android setup, and you can go into the actual Android SDK manager, as it were. So if you need additional versions and different APIs, add them later. The installers only go install the basic ones for you here. Obviously, you've got the option, the Google Android emulator. You can put Java in there if you want. Just don't have to. It's just an option. And again, optionally, you can also get a Xamarin account. I do recommend it because you just simply get news and updates from the Xamarin teams. Sometimes I think Miguel writes those himself when they come out, but hey ho. One word of advice though is that for some bizarre reason, the Microsoft Android emulator is not in this list, you'll notice, because if you select the mobile development with .NET, it only gives you the Google Android emulator. If you want to have the Microsoft Android emulator, and there's a few other Android SDK, NDK settings, then also check on the mobile development C++ module. It just adds a few extra little things in there. I don't know why they're separate. It confused the hell out of me when I was trying to do this, because today I've been constantly uninstalling, reinstalling, rebuilding Visual Studio 2017, and I probably trashed the entire thing several times over, and no doubt have to wipe my machine and start again just to figure out what's going on. But anyway, that's enough of my setup woes. This is all for your benefit, for making sure that you can identify the components you need and only those you need to get what you need done. It's not putting any other rubbish in there, like F#. I feel like you can do F# for Android. I don't know why. Anyway, I digress. So if you watch the 2015 video, you can skip over this, but basically is that with Android, be aware, it is a very fragmented platform. Likely you're going to need several projects, or you're going to need lots of hash ifs to handle all the different variations that you have between mobile vendors, memory constraints, device capabilities, API versions. It really is fun developing for Android, so be aware, plan ahead. What I say is that work out what it is you want to support, work out what those need, and then build from there. And then if you need different project things, but if you use a proper multi-platform project, all your code's in one place. So the only thing that changes is the actual target platform for spitting out the actual Android file that you actually want to then deploy. I completely forgot the name for extension for Android file is. But hey ho, I digress again. If you do it by default, you're just going to get a Google Android emulator, and it really is a pain. And for those who've suffered through the Android days when you only had the Android emulator to help you, yes, I do feel you. But I highly recommend using the Microsoft one. Granted, you need to go into the other option to select it, but it's there. But you will need a machine with at least 8 gigs of memory to run it. I found that if you got less than that, you can try and tweak the settings, but if, like me, you got only 4 gig on some machines for when you're testing, it ain't going to run. So don't bother. It's almost better to simply use a device, but again, deploying to a device takes time, so plan ahead. But there is also the Xamarin Cloud test, and now they also recently announced Azure Mobile test, as they announced in the Visual Studio launch day. If you look at mobileazure.com, it's currently in preview, which means it's free, so go hammer it and test it to your heart's desire. At some point, they will start to put a price on it, but for now, it's free, so go and play around. And that's great because you deploy your project there once it's all set up, and they will build it and deploy it to physical devices and test it for you. And judging by the reports yesterday, is that it's really worth checking out, and it'll certainly help you if you're targeting many devices. As I said before, just get a Xamarin account. It's free, and if nothing else, you'll get news and updates. So, That's Android. So if you switch over to iOS and macOS, not much has changed in this space for MonoGame 3.6 and 2017. If you've already installed the Android option, you're already set up for iOS because it's just the mobile development.net. There isn't anything else. There's no extra bells and whistles just because it's iOS, it's Mac. To do anything, you need a Mac at the end of the day. There's no getting around. Again, recommend a Xamarin account, and you might want to also offer up for the executive or the premium services they provide. But if you're doing development for iOS, you're going to need a Mac, whether it's a Mac Mini or a Power Mac or whatever your budget can support and what you need, you're going to need one. If you're building for Mac, it can only be done on a Mac. Sorry, Windows is out the option. You'll have to get MonoDevelop, and if you install MonoGame on MonoDevelop, you also get the Mac templates. If you're building for iOS, things are a bit better because you can actually build it on Windows. You can check all your code, do all tests and things like that. But to actually build it and deploy it, you're going to need a Mac. And there's a lovely post, let's go through in a minute, to actually show you about how to set that up. Like anything else, testing with iOS is recommended to test on physical devices. That's simply because of different iOS versions, different devices, different capabilities. Older devices with a newer OS, the performance might not be as good as it used to be on the old one and things like that. It's just the way of the world with Apple. And if you're used to Apple, you know what I'm talking about. With the MonoGame, there's nothing else on there. It's a very lightweight framework and it works well. So when you're getting started up with iOS is that, like I said, you need a Mac. You can go and buy a cheap one. I have a nice £50 Mac Mini, which is great for propping the door open when I'm not using it. Keeps a nice cool drafting coming in the summer regions. And when it's running, it's just plugged in and it just sits under my desk and I simply don't touch it. It's great. And all I simply do is tell Visual Studio, right, there's my Mac, go use it. A few things to be aware of before you go out and buy a nice machine. And it must support the latest iOS SDK. It must support the latest version of Xcode. And at a minimum, it needs OS X 10 or 10.10 to be specific, to be able to actually run the Xamarin software. If it can't run that, don't buy it. You are just throwing money out, unless you can use that as a test device. But hey ho. The Xamarin software to get the build host and develop on the Mac is all free still. You will need to have a Xamarin account to do that, but if you want the extended capabilities and all the premium features, you will need either a Xamarin license or an MSDN subscription. Since Microsoft owns Xamarin now, either one will do, and they'll give you all the features in there. On this link here, there's a full detailed page of how to set up your Mac build host or for developing on a Mac, so have a read of it and get through. So if we jump onto Windows 10, now for this due to you who watched the 2015 video, you'll notice I jumped over Windows 8, simply because you can't develop from Windows 8 in 2017. If you've got 2015, this is one of the different things. If you have 2015 installed along with 2017, you can do some things, but you can't create new ones. It's just a land. And it happened in 2013 when we were moving from Windows 7 and 8.0. In 2015, you could only do 8.1 packages and things like that. And this is just the natural evolution. But with obviously the Windows Universal Platform, you're building for Xbox, PC, laptops, slates, IoT devices, HoloLens. It's all one. It is an all-in-one encompassing platform. But with that great power comes great responsibility. I'm starting to hate that phrase now. Installing this with 2017, again, is fairly easy. There's an entire module committed to this. One thing I will stress, though, is that, by default, when you install this, none of these options on the right are selected. But you must have, if you're going to do MonoGame, both of the SDKs installed. There may be more later as they add them on. You don't have to have the emulator, that's optional, but it can be useful if you're doing testing. But I'll stress, you need the SDKs, because without those, MonoGame's not going to work out of the box. You're going to have to tweak and change your project before you get to build. So for safety's sake, keep them on until the creators update's out there in the wild and has a great adoption rate. Then you're going to need these to support those lower versions. If you're supporting things like the Xbox, then you're going to need to use the later SDKs and things like that. So like the anniversary update and things, which you can see the anniversary update 14.393 is installed by default, but not the older 2.14.586 versions. So select them if you're doing MonoGame. You're going to need them. And obviously, to develop for Windows, you're going to need a Windows Store license. It's a one-time free, and then you're set for life. And they made that so cheap now. There's no reason just not to get it to then ship it. Now there's several billion Windows devices out there that keep selling us. There you go. Good thing about Windows 10, it just works. You build it once and ship it anyway, it'll just run. But I still say take advantage of a lot of the API features that come with Windows 10 UWP and use the API versioning checks to your advantage to make sure the fact that you're not running on code on things that shouldn't run, just to make it a nice, cleaner experience for your users. It's not going to crash, it's not going to error, it will stop you building, but it's not going to break a machine. So gone are the days when I've coded something and oh my goodness, I've run it on a device, it doesn't have that capability, it just goes bang. They're gone. With UWP, it will always just work. And if it's not going to work, then the compiler's basically going to say, sorry, no, I'm not going to let you. Have a read up. I covered some of this in the UWP for Xbox session, so it's worth checking out, where we use elements that are from the Xbox, not on anything else, and you can put if statements around to make sure that everything else ignores it and only the Xbox uses it, things like that. Now, this is where I said there was a late reported issue with when you're using Visual Studio 2017 on its own. This baffled everybody because it was fully tested with 2017, but only when you had 2015 installed. And when that happened, it worked. If you had Visual Studio 2017 installed on its own, a nice clean machine, then for some reason the MonoGame templates just would not work. So a quick fix has been put in there. It's there live in the development release. So if you're using 2017 on its own at the moment, just grab the dev release. It's that close after the 3.6 release. It's almost identical for the moment. There's a few little things in there, but nothing major. So, and as I expect, there will be a point release out for 3.6 sometime in the near future. And if not, then we'll probably get a more rapid release cycle for MonoGame at some point. So there you go. There's a link there which takes you through to the actual dev release if you want to get directly to it, or simply go to the monogame.rocks website. So I still love that name. Thank you, Tom, for that. That's setting that domain up and getting it all working. And go to the download section and just look for the MonoGame for Visual Studio development release. And you can download direct from there. It's up to you. And for UWP, remember, it's a one-size-fits-all platform. So when you're building projects, plan for how you're going to use resolution, kind of input patterns, UX patterns, and things like that. Just remember, some platforms don't have touch and don't have certain capabilities. So, plan ahead for what you're going to do and go on. A few other things is that MonoGame completely supports the new Creators Development Program, or the Xbox Live Creators Development Program that has just been launched, which allows you to build UWP projects for shipping to the Xbox just via the store. You don't have to be registered with ID, although since that's free, I'd highly recommend you do it anyway. If you want to then take your project and you want to go to the native Xbox, then MonoGame has got you back. MonoGame fully supports the Xbox One in a native platform, but you will have to have a project with the ID team, and once you get their people talking to the MonoGame people, they'll let you in onto the Xbox code branch for MonoGame. Everything's the same from the API perspective, so your game will simply just work. You'll just have to then update it to cope with the hundreds of certification requirements for getting in on the native Xbox. It's a bigger task because there's a lot more requirements to make sure your game works as it should do on Xbox rather than through the UWP sandbox. In effect, it's an option. There's certain advantage to that, I suppose, from a performance perspective, but I always find there's a lot of projects you don't necessarily need all that. So start small, work your way up. If you want to then have your evolved or your next gen experience, then do that. Ship and UWP, then ship native, and have complementary products which can recognize each other. So there's a lot to be said for building your brand and getting your story out there when you're developing for things like this. So a lot of things to take into account. To sort of finish off, all the things you need to think of when you're starting off with MonoGame. So, and I say this every single time, plan for your content. If you're planning to target multiple platforms, if you're going to do different releases and different content, start from day one, work out how your project's going to start off, because changing later will be a pain. Look at the multi-platform project video that I recorded earlier and work out how you want to construct things. Try to have a centralized content project for all your platforms that you're going to use, and only have platform specific ones where you need them to add or change certain things. It'll just make your life a lot easier and make it easier to manage going forward, especially as you start to add more and more platforms. When you build a game, market early, get out there, make sure people know what your game is, just to talk about. That's not to say, hey, I'm going to release in 2 years. No, just get people talking about your game, get them in there, get them testing, and, get your game in front of people to look at. I do this for a lot of projects and a lot of teams. If I see a beta or an alpha or testing system out there, I'll put my hand up and go out there because I love testing these things, and I will always give very brutal and honest feedback. Always constructive to make sure the fact that, I give you several solutions of what you want to do, how you're going to work, and it's just good sense to get out there and have people playing your game. Don't just be you, the only person playing it when you ship it. You only have to look at some of the review comments you see on stores to see that's there's no harm in testing things to death, but just not too far, but as much as you can. So test your projects, get others to test it, get feedback, and remember at the end of the day it's your project. So go in the direction that you want to go and take feedback as it is. It's just suggestions at the end of the day. It's your game. So that was me. Another session. So if you're using MonoGame with Visual Studio 2017, comment below or tell the team, and find anything else, any little buggets, because obviously this is brand new, it's out there, so let us know what's going on, and solidarity, brothers and sisters, and onwards and upwards for the next session. And off you go.